Calcutta in the 1820s was the administrative center of East India Company power. The architecture lining streets like Chowringhee Road was designed to be imposing, creating a clear expectation of how high-ranking colonial officials were meant to live. But when Bishop Heber arrived in 1824 as the supreme religious official in the region, he found that the company had neglected to arrange a residence. There were no orders to build a palace, and no houses had been set aside for his arrival. The temporary solution was a rental property costing the government a staggering 600 rupees a month. It was a cavernous, impractical space. Heber wrote that he felt lost in a dining room 67 feet long. This initial administrative oversight became the legal precedent for the next quarter century. For the next 3 bishops, housing would no longer be a matter of imperial right, but a series of negotiations over rental agreements and accounting spreadsheets. To address the housing gap, the company signed an 11-year lease for a massive estate on Russell Street. The property was owned by a private landlord and merchant named James Paddle. This created a specific triangular tension. The government paid the rent, Paddle held the lease and avoided maintenance costs, and the bishop lived in the house, bearing the physical consequences of any disputes between the two. The church in India was now functioning within the constraints of a private corporate contract, leaving the bishop's daily life subject to the whims of a local landlord. By 1826, Archdeacon Corey became convinced the Russell Street estate was structurally failing. He formally represented to the government that the building was unsafe and that his life was in jeopardy. The record shows Corey's alarm. The government appointed architects to inspect the building. They reported the house was safe. When Corey protested, the Advocate General issued a legal opinion. The government had no power to cancel the lease with Mr. Paddle. The company's bureaucracy prioritized the contract's integrity over the physical safety of its personnel. The property continued to deteriorate. By 1827, the walls had been stripped of plaster, locks were missing from the doors, and the iron bars meant for security had been removed and never replaced. James Paddle refused to fund the repairs. He cited specific terms of the lease which exempted him from most maintenance costs until the year 1829. In 1830, Bishop Turner formally requested to change his residence due to the miserable state of the palace. The government's reply in item 55 was a flat refusal. Unwilling to end the contract at a loss, they forced Turner to stay. The bishop was now living in a house with missing locks and stripped walls, held there by a lease agreement that the government considered more important than the residence itself. When Bishop Wilson arrived, he realized that the only way to escape the Russell Street estate was to move faster than the government's own paperwork. Wilson began scouting a new property. This document notes he acted with the utmost secrecy and dispatch. He knew that if his interest became public, the price of the house would be inflated to exploit the government's budget. He personally secured the right of refusal for a house for 49,000 rupees. To prevent any bureaucratic blockades, he officially guaranteed the government that he would bear the financial loss himself if his plan failed. By securing the new property with his own leverage, he forced the government into a trade. He would take the new house, and the government would take the old Russell Street lease off his hands to finally settle the debt. The Governor-General, Lord Dalhousie, was so impressed by the maneuver that he praised Wilson as one of the best men of business he had ever encountered. Wilson didn't resolve the crisis through his religious office. He ended the 25-year stalemate by outplaying the East India Company in a private real estate negotiation. Structures like the Fort William Barracks reflect the institutional reality of the British Empire. This was a world defined by repetitive architecture and strict administrative control. Behind the grand architecture, the empire functioned as a penny-pinching bureaucracy, where surviving the system often required the skills of a cutthroat administrative tactician.